Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks for being with us on this Friday afternoon. Maybe it's Friday evening where you are. Maybe it's even Saturday morning where you are. Wherever you are, we're just glad you're here with us. Thanks for being here with us. Man, Darren did a good job for Friday. We got a good 2 hours. Second hour, we're going to talk with a guest we have not had on before, Father Tom Davis from Connecticut, a Melkite priest, but also an expert in bioethics, and has been doing some wonderful media on bioethics and whatnot. So we're going to close out the week, the 5-day work week, with some bioethics conversation. If you have questions in that regard or concerns maybe in that regard, you're very welcome to call the second hour. First hour, not only not his first time, but probably not his 100th time of being on Catholic Answers Live. I don't know. John Martinoni from his many years, 17 years, as a matter of fact, of being on Open Line on EWTN Radio. He's the author of a book called Blue Collar Apologetics, and the founder and president of the Bible Christian Society, which is an apologetics and evangelization apostolate that reaches hundreds of thousands of people each year around the United States and around the world. John Martinoni, thanks for being with us.
Cy, it's a pleasure to be back on Catholic Answers Live once again.
And your primary focus in apologetics, you can answer all the apologetics questions, I'm sure, but you are very interested in the use of the Bible to do Catholic apologetics.
Right. Here in Alabama, we're 3 to 4% Catholic, and everything I do in apologetics has grown out of my personal experiences. And after I had come back into the church after being out for 13 years, I was working at a bank. Finance is my background. And all these people were asking me, well, why do Catholics do this? Where in the Bible is this? Where in the Bible is that? And so I learned how to answer, where is this or that doctrine or dogma in the Bible?
If that's something that you're interested in, if you have questions about using the Bible for Catholic apologetics, you're very welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. That's perfectly fair, really. I mean, you're working in a bank or a financial institution, and someone's raised Baptist or Methodist or Presbyterian, and they say, you Catholics do this, but the Bible says that, or that seems like a perfectly fair challenge.
It is, but the first few times as a Catholic that you experience that, you don't really know what to do, how to reply. And so at first I would say, look at the time. I got to,
Yeah.
I think I've got an appointment or something. Or I hear my mom calling, or so, it's like, get me out of here, Percy. I don't want to be talking about the Bible and Jesus with a Baptist, or because they start hitting me with Bible verse after Bible verse, and I really did not know how to respond to that. So you're right. It is a fair question from their perspective. But for Catholics who don't really know their faith and don't really know how to associate their faith with the Bible, it can be very intimidating.
Again, the number 888-318-7884. Strategies for using the Bible in apologetics. You are very welcome to call with your questions for our guest, John Martinoni. 888-318-7884. So what were I could probably guess some of the most common challenges, or maybe people wanted to know why we believe in purgatory when that's not in the Bible. Maybe people wanted to know why we I suppose some people might say worship, but others might just say, why we're so over the moon for Mary when there's so little about Mary in the Bible. What else? What are the common biblical objections to Catholic faith?
Well, you hit on two of the biggest: Mary and purgatory. Then there's the Pope. There's some of the teachings on the sacraments. For example, why do you confess your sins to a priest instead of going straight to God? Where is that in the Bible? Where is baptizing babies in the Bible? Where does the Bible say to drink Jesus's blood, or things along those lines? And so, it's those are the big three, though. Really, Mary, the Pope, purgatory, a few others here and there. If you can learn how to respond to just a few of the particular topical items that we just mentioned, then you're going to be able to answer 80% of the questions that people ask you about using the Bible.
Indeed. Do you think that I get the sense that now I guess it's about 20 years, maybe more like 25 now, that Catholic radio has really been on the ascendancy here in the United States. I think people who are listening to Catholic radio actually are doing a better job with this. I think we're in better shape than we were 25 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. I tell people all the time, whenever I go somewhere around the country and give talks at parishes or conferences, the questions I get from people in the audience who are in areas where there is Catholic radio are much more probing and deeper questions than I get from people who do not have Catholic radio in their area, because they've been listening to Catholic Answers, they've been listening to Open Line, they've been listening to Jonette Bankovic and all the others, and they just they know more about their faith. When Catholic radio started here in Birmingham years back, I was the manager, and I had somebody probably 2 months after the radio went on the air. They sent me a written letter, back when people used to handwrite letters, and they said, I have learned more in 3 weeks of listening to Catholic Answers Live than I did in 12 years of Catholic schooling. So, yes, the Catholic radio does a very good job of educating the faithful.
It does, yeah, and some of that may have to do with you're ready for it. It's where in fourth grade in Catholic school you weren't ready. Now the question is coming. Life has brought these questions up. It's not just read chapter 3 and then memorize it, but life brings up these questions, and then we're more ready for the answer when we're older.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and that's the thing. In high school, well, like you said, in fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, you're hearing these things. They're telling you stories. You learn about Noah and the flood and things along those lines, but you don't really learn apologetics in any way, shape, or form, or even the beginning of apologetics at that age. In high school, if you don't start learning apologetics, then what I tell people is a lot of people in Catholic schools, they've gone through 12 years. By the time they graduate high school, they know the what of the Catholic faith, but they don't necessarily know the why of the Catholic faith. And if you don't know why you believe what you believe, or the church teaches what it teaches, then when someone asks you a question about it, you don't know what to say. And that's where somebody starts undermining, well, if you don't know the answer and you've been through 12 years of Catholic school, maybe there's not an answer. Maybe Mr. Baptist or Miss Evangelical is right in what they're saying. And so it plants a seed of doubt in your mind if you don't know why the church teaches what it teaches when you get questioned about it.
John Martinoni, our guest. Your calls are welcome. Lines beginning to fill up. You're welcome to call with your question about the strategies for using the Bible in Catholic apologetics. 888-318-7884. We'll start with Will in Columbus, Ohio, listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Will, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for John Martinoni.
Hi. So I've been following Cameron Bertuzzi and Matt Fradd and Scott Hahn has gotten in on a pretty intense debate on the papacy, and I find that that's like usually the last domino that has to fall with a lot of Protestants. And of course, the biggest objection is, where's this or that in the Bible? So if you could speak to that for a little while, that'd be great, because that's like the number one thing I see people have to square before they can acknowledge the Catholic faith.
Yeah, like I said, the Pope is one of the big three, I would say, in terms of objections that need to be overcome by people before they seriously consider entering the Catholic faith. And one of the first passages I look to is, of course, Matthew 16, verses 16 to 19. But basically, if you look, Jesus asked the apostles, who do people say that I am? And they say, well, John the Baptist, Elijah. He said, who do you say that I am? And Simon says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And in verse 17, Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. So Peter received a special revelation from the Father. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the powers of death shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So basically what goes on here is that Jesus gives Peter, and only Peter, the keys to the kingdom of heaven. The other apostles received the power of binding and loosing in union with Peter. We see that in Matthew 18, verses 15 to 18. But here, Peter has the keys. And if you look back to Isaiah 22, basically what Jesus is doing is he is quoting indirectly, or maybe paraphrasing Isaiah 22, because in Isaiah 22, what's going on? You've got Shebna is the prime minister of the kingdom of David, and he's going to be replaced, and he gets replaced, and he says, I'm going to give your successor the key to the kingdom. What do the keys signify? Authority. So we see that Peter has the authority of the kingdom of heaven, of Jesus's church. And then in John 21, what does Jesus say to Peter? Peter, do you love me? 3 times. 3 times Peter says yes. Jesus comes back, says, feed my sheep, tend my flock, feed my lambs. Who does that? The shepherd of the church. So we see that Peter was essentially appointed, and there are other passages, Luke 22, at the Last Supper, Jesus prays for Peter to strengthen his brethren. And he's praying for Peter and Peter alone, not the other apostles who were there. So in all these instances, we see that Peter was the chief apostle and that Jesus appointed him as shepherd of his church in Jesus's upcoming absence, which was, when Jesus was telling him, feed my sheep, tend my flock, etc. Jesus was only, a few days, several days from leaving earth altogether, going up into heaven after his resurrection. So in all these things, we see Peter, the chief apostle, the chief shepherd in Jesus' stead. And you have to ask yourself, well, once Peter dies, would Jesus leave the church without a shepherd? And so that's where we get, we've got the historical records of the popes succeeding Peter, the Bishop of Rome, each Bishop of Rome succeeding Peter as the head of the church. And so those are just a few of the Bible passages where you can see Peter as head of the church and the seeds for what we would say are the papacy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that call. We have to take our first break. Strategies for using the Bible in Catholic apologetics with John Martinoni this hour. Your call is welcome. 888-318-7884. A couple lines open. 888-318-7884.
Catch Catholic Answers live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Wherever you are in the world, you can access the EWTN Global Catholic Network. It's everywhere. You can get EWTN's great Catholic programming on your car radio, at home on your TV, computer, or smart speaker. With EWTN's app, you can take EWTN everywhere on your phone or mobile device. If you want your news in print, turn to EWTN's paper of record, the National Catholic Register. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
John Martinoni is our guest. You might know his book, Blue Collar Apologetics. You're welcome to call with your question about using the Bible in Catholic apologetics. 888-318-7884 is the number. Before I go back to the phones, Carrie has been giving me these interesting scripts all week to read. I got to read another one. We're kind of sad, and you might be too. Our store-wide sale is going away at midnight on Sunday. But turn that frown upside down. You still have 3 days left to save big bucks. That was, I don't know. I'm not going to rate it while I'm reading it. Lots of reasons to go. 10 to 25% off on everything. 50% off on School of Apologetics courses. $50 or more purchase, you get free shipping. All kinds of good things. Head on over right now to shop.catholic.com and get your deal. Shop.catholic.com. Will you tell us a little bit about Blue Collar Apologetics, and then I'll head back to the phones?
Sure. Blue Collar Apologetics, again, it's grown out of my personal experiences and the talks that I was giving around the country on all these various apologetics topics, once saved, always saved, sola scriptura, sola fide, the Pope, etc. And I realized in the talks there was these common threads that were coming through about strategies that I was telling people. This is how you use this. This is how you do this. This is how you approach someone. This is how you respond when someone approaches you. And so I ended up making a talk called Apologetics for the Scripturally Challenged, which is the basis for the book Blue Collar Apologetics. And then I can see from your reaction, you know who I'm talking about when I say the scripturally challenged. That's
almost everybody I know. Yeah,
right. Basically. So at Blue Collar Apologetics, what I do is I teach 4 strategies for doing apologetics. They're mostly common sense. And the subtitle of the book is How to Explain and Defend Catholic Teaching Using Common Sense, Simple Logic, and the Bible. So even if I tell people, even if you don't know where Genesis is in the Bible, I can teach you how to talk to the head of a Baptist seminary about the Bible using these techniques that you find in the Bible Christian Society.
That is wonderful.
I mean, in Blue Collar Apologetics.
Yeah. Yeah, what a Blue Collar Apologetics. You can get, it's been out for a while now. I can find Genesis in the Bible because Genesis tells you where it's in the Bible. It's in the beginning.
If you use common sense, yes.
All right, back to the phones we go. Edward in Chicago, Illinois, listening on 1060 AM. We're so glad to have that station in Chicago, 1060 AM, and we're glad you're here. Edward, go ahead with your question for John Martinoni.
All right, thank you for taking my call, and thank you, John. My question is related to something I've heard through my Catholic upbringing, which is not to judge other people. And I have Protestant friends tell me that it's not written in the Bible that we ought not to judge each other, that we can judge each other. And I thought that judging each other was what God does to us on Judgment Day. And I wasn't sure how to respond to Protestants that say that's not biblical.
Okay, here's the thing. In Matthew 7, this is the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 7, the very first verse, so very easy to find. Matthew 7:1, judge not that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. So judge not lest ye be judged. That's absolutely scriptural. But here's the thing. You have to understand, if you take it in context with all of Scripture, we can judge others' actions. We cannot judge their hearts. We don't know the mind and the heart. In Revelation, it talks about how Jesus is the one who judges the minds and hearts of men and women, not us. But we can judge someone's actions. If we see someone stealing, we can say, look, that's wrong. If we see someone lying or hear someone lying, we can say that's wrong to do. Or if you have a friend who's married and he's cheating on his wife, you can say, hey, man, that's not right what you're doing. So you can judge the actions of others. You cannot judge their hearts. You can't judge whether they're good or bad. There are people all the time. I've been to a number of funerals where people say, well, we know so-and-so's in heaven. Well, the deceased. Well, no, we don't know that they're in heaven because we can't judge their hearts. We can't condemn them to hell, but we as individuals cannot canonize them into heaven either. The church can, but we can't. So judging the heart, that is indeed God's province. That's where that's his job, not ours. But we can judge people's actions, and we are called to tell people when their actions are wrong and they're doing things that are sinful and contrary to the teaching of God. We're called to be a witness to them in those situations. Does that help you out, Edward?
Yes, it certainly does, John. Thank you.
Thanks, Edward. Appreciate that call. Our number here is 888-318-7884. Just 2 lines open at the moment, but lines open up as we go. You're very welcome to call if you have questions about using the Bible in Catholic apologetics. Maybe there's a strategy that would help you in using the Bible in Catholic apologetics. We'll go now to Noel in Houston, Texas, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Noel, go ahead with your question for John Martinoni.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Happy to.
My question is more, before you get to the discussion question, how do you approach, or should you approach? I've kind of taken the idea of preach the gospel always, if necessary, use words, approach most of the time, but I find that my Protestant friends, while they may speak, admirably about the way we live our faith, we have been serious about our faith in our 28 years of marriage and, taught it to our children and that sort of thing. I don't have many friends that are asking for why do you believe in the Pope, or, why is your service Mass different than our service, and that sort of thing. So is there a point where you actually approach people? Now, sometimes people have in the past, and I have responded with some of the things you're talking about, but in general, if they don't approach, do you not say? So I'll just be quiet and listen.
Okay. First off, I want to say, preach the gospel always, when necessary, use words. That's often attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, but none of his early biographers ever wrote that down. So we don't know that St. Francis ever actually said that. And the thing is he actually used words a whole lot of times. And I have found that, I don't know anyone who is so holy in my life that just by looking at their life, I would go, golly, why? What is it that makes you so holy? I want that, because we're all sinners. So there's very few St. Francis of Assisi's roaming around the planet Earth these days, unfortunately. So it is often and usually necessary to use words. If they don't approach you, what I tell people, and I'm going to tell you, get my book, because my book, a shameless plug here, my book will help you learn techniques that not only help in responding to questions when approached, but teach you how to approach people with your own questions that can start dialogues and start the evangelization process. So if someone is not approaching you, what I tell you, I said, be more Catholic. If you go to dinner or lunch with friends, make sure you make the sign of the cross and say grace, and just let them know that you're Catholic, because a lot of times people are waiting for an opportunity to evangelize you. I tell people all the time, if you let evangelicals, Baptists, Church of Christ, etc. know that you're Catholic, you don't have to go evangelize them. They will come to you, and then you can use their force of evangelization, turn it around on them. So be more Catholic, do things publicly that signify that you are a Catholic. If that still doesn't work to have people approach you, then you can approach them. How do you do that? Easy. People generally love to talk about their faith when asked a question. So ask them a question. Well, what church do you go to? Oh, I go to First Baptist of Galveston. Oh, okay. Well, what do they teach there? Just ask. We'll say, what does your pastor preach on most of the time? What are some of the teachings of the church? I had a very good friend who was Baptist. This was several years back. And I asked her one time, I said, well, what does your church teach? She said, what do you mean? I said, what are the teachings of your church? I don't know. She just went, she heard the pastor, and she thought, okay, that was a great sermon. But she didn't know what the doctrinal body of teachings was for her church. I said, so go ask your pastor. She said, okay. And when she came back to me the following week, she said, I asked my pastor. She said, you know what he told me? I said, what? She said, he hasn't had anybody ask him that question in 25 years of being a pastor. So I thought, okay, so ask people what they believe and then why they believe it. And when they tell you, they say, well, ask them to use their question against them in the way of trying. What I mean by that is to start a conversation, to start evangelizing, is ask them, where in the Bible is that? Where in the Bible is this? And just soak it in at first. Don't try to respond necessarily. Just soak it in and then go think about it, pray about it, and figure out, okay, how do I come back for the second round? And go from there. But ask questions.
Noel, thanks. You can probably hear the music. We have to take a quick break. Quite a few more calls. John Martinoni, our guest, using the Bible in apologetics.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com. Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
This is Dr. David Anders. Join us for an engaging hour of questions and answers about the Catholic faith here on Called to Communion, Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Don't forget, second hour, we've got a brand new guest, somebody we've been seeing in other Catholic media, Father Tom Davis, who does a wonderful job talking about bioethics. So we'll just take your bioethics questions. We'll talk to Father Tom a little bit and then take any bioethics questions you have in the second hour. Questions about life in its earliest stages, its latest stages, when people are struggling with disability or illness, or maybe even some of these new things that are coming out about enhancing folks who don't have any problem at all. If you got a bioethics question, we'd love to get you an answer. 888-318-7884. That's next hour. This hour, using the Bible in apologetics, strategies for using the Bible. If you've got a question for John Martinoni in that vein, 888-318-7884. Going up to New Jersey now. Amelia, watching on YouTube. Amelia, you there with us?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Amelia. How old are you?
10.
Well, thank you very much for your call. Amelia, go ahead with your question for Mr. Martinoni.
I was just wondering if when God came back to Earth on Easter, did Pontius Pilate see him and knew he was wrong?
Well, it would seem not from the scripture, and the fact that after there's it's almost like a throwaway line in the Bible, if you will, but there's a line that says after Jesus was condemned to death by Pilate, and after his crucifixion, it says Pilate and King Herod became great friends after that. So you have to think, why do they become great friends? Because they both, I think, probably deep down in their souls knew that they had condemned an innocent man. And so they shared each other's misery, if you will, or they were partners in crime, if you will. And so I don't think Pontius Pilate, now maybe he did because his wife had some dreams about Jesus, but and she told him, she said, be careful what you do with this man. She said, I've been greatly distressed about him today in my dreams. And so possibly he repented of what he had done, but we just don't know for sure one way or the other.
Okay, Amelia?
Okay, thank you.
All right, call again whenever you got a question, okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to go from New Jersey all the way across to Oregon now. Pat in Oregon, listening on the mighty Mater Dei Radio. Pat, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for John Martinoni.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call.
Well, you're very welcome.
Thank you. My question is, what does the Bible say about the process of the resurrection of our loved ones and ourselves, and what happens to souls?
Okay, what happens to souls? When you die, death is essentially defined as the separation of the body and the soul. And so when you die, you get buried, your body remains here, and it for most people it becomes corrupt, and if you're dead long enough before Jesus comes back, your body will essentially turn to dust. From dust to dust, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So, but the soul is eternal. And so your soul, when you die, either will head to heaven, straight to heaven, if you're in a state of grace and have no attachment to sin whatsoever, or no punishment due to sin whatsoever, straight to heaven. Or your soul could go to purgatory first if you still need to be cleansed, let's say, to be purified, to be purged of your imperfections of your soul before going to heaven. Or your soul could end up in hell. At the resurrection of the dead, which is at the end of time, when Jesus returns for the second and final time, body and soul are reunited. So your bodies are brought back, they're reanimated, so to speak, and then the soul enters your body. And then at the great judgment, the last judgment, your final disposition is made known to all. You already know it, but it's made known to all. And either you will spend eternity, body and soul, in heaven, or eternity, body and soul, in hell.
Now, does that all make sense to you, Pat?
Yes, the only thing I was wondering is, I've heard, and I don't know if this is a Protestant thought, that there'll be a trumpet and there'll be a rapture.
Oh, okay. I was wondering if that might have been part of what you were saying, but no, there will be no rapture along the lines of what the Protestants believe. There are these books that they're called the Left Behind books and movies that were very popular. I think they sold, 80, 90 million copies of the books. It was crazy. And in the books, what's happened is, the sound of the trumpet, and you get this from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and it says the dead in Christ will rise first, and we who are left at the end of time there, well, for the rapture people it's not the end of time, but left alive after the great tribulation in Protestant theology, we who are left shall get caught up in the air to meet Jesus in the clouds. And so they're saying that's the rapture. And they'll point to verses like in Matthew 25, it talks about Matthew 24, it talks about the days of Noah. And it says, as in the days of Noah, so will be the Son of Man. so will be the days of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, etc. The flood came and swept them away. So it will be with the coming of the Son of Man. Then 2 men will be in the field, one is taken, one is left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one is taken, one is left. See, Protestants say one is taken. They're raptured. They get to go up to heaven with Jesus. In other words, Jesus comes 9/10 of the way back to earth, stops, picks up all the true Christians, and heads back to heaven. But think about what he's saying here. He says, as in the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Well, after the flood, who was left after the flood? Noah and his family. The good guys were left. The bad guys were taken away. And there's a corresponding verse in Luke 17, and it says the days of Noah, as in the days of Lot, will be the days of the Son of Man. Well, in the days of Lot, after Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, who was left behind? Lot and his family. And furthermore, in 1 Thessalonians 4, where it says the so-called rapture passage, it says, we who are left shall get to meet Jesus. So the Left Behind books actually spout a theology that is the exact opposite of what the Bible says. There will be no rapture like what Protestant theology says. What's going on in 1 Thessalonians 4, where people are caught up in the air to meet Jesus in the clouds, is those people are being caught up to meet him on his return to earth, and they're given the singular privilege and honor of escorting him back to earth on the final leg of his journey. It's like what would happen in the old days when most of the cities had walls around them. When a great general or king or prince or queen, someone of notoriety would come to your town, you wouldn't make them just come and knock on the gate, the city gate, and then open. A contingent would go out to meet this person and escort them into the city. That's what's going on with this so-called rapture. It's not like the Protestants say, and I've got a whole chapter on that in my book that goes through it, piece by piece, Bible verse by Bible verse. The rapture is not happening, just not happening.
Pat, does that all make sense to you?
Yes, thank you so much for clarifying that for me.
Wonderful, Pat. Thank you very much for the call. We have to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more calls for John Martignoni on strategies for using the Bible in Catholic apologetics. The number, 888-318-7884.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley of the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
This is Conversations with Consequences, where we delve deeper into issues affecting our church, our country, and our core, the family.
As Catholics, we need to be informed, aware, and able to talk through some of the tough topics that we're facing in our culture and in our world. Conversations with Consequences gives us the tools to do so.
It's not enough to pray. We have to be a light for the world.
Conversations with Consequences, tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. John Martignoni with us to the top of the hour, and lots of folks on the line. So we will. I'm going to head right back to the phones. I guess we'll go to Rockford, Illinois. Teresa in Rockford, Illinois, watching on YouTube. Go ahead, please, with your question for John Martignoni.
Down or maybe not.
Hi, Teresa.
Oh, hello.
Hi, you're on the air, Teresa. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, my question is, I attend groups with evangelical people. I'm involved with groups of my husband is a evangelical Christian, and when we do a lot of breaks for praying during our Bible study, etc. And I've always held back doing the sign of the cross, and even when I visited his church, and I feel like perhaps I am doing the wrong thing by not making the sign of the cross when I am with all of those people. And
you want John?
Wanted your opinion.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. I'm going to tell you, I was exactly where you are. When I came back into the church and I was just starting to really learn my faith for the first time, I did not make the sign of the cross. When people would pray at lunch, the Good Baptist or Church of Christ that I worked with at the bank, or I got involved in a prison ministry that had, it was what was known as an interdenominational prison ministry, and they would pray. I wouldn't make the sign of the cross, but slowly I decided, I said, no, I should not have to give up what is particular to my faith in order to fit in this group. And so I decided I am going to make the sign of the cross the next time at lunch at work somebody says, let's say grace. And even though I'm not the one praying, I'm going to make the sign of the cross. Well, first time I made that resolution, it's like, I chickened out, just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And then I was kicking myself. I said, I need to do this. I need to and it's not a sin not to do it or anything like that. But it was something that for me, it was like, it's not right that I should have to sacrifice my Catholicity, to get along with the evangelicals or Baptists or so. So this next time I was like, I'm going to do it. And I did it. Made the sign of the cross. And that alerted people, he's Catholic. And slowly but surely people started asking me questions. And I didn't know the answers to the questions. So that's what led me to go and find out the answers. And just something that simple is what literally led me to where I am today. Now, not everybody who, in this position is going to end up on the radio or giving talks at parishes and everything. But it led me to learn more about my faith because it opened the door for these folks to ask me questions. And some of them, and I'll be honest with you, some of them say, you're Catholic. All Catholics are going to hell, don't you? And I'm like, okay. But I've gotten to where I even appreciate that comment because that shows that person is concerned about the salvation of my soul. Now, they're misguided, they're misdirected, they misunderstand the teachings of the church, why we believe what we believe, but they're concerned about the salvation of my soul. And what it did in all of these instances, it opened the doors for conversation. And as I learned more about my faith, I was able to come back and give them answers and plant seeds. I never tell anybody, I don't convert anybody. The Holy Spirit's job is conversion. My job is just to throw the seeds out there and hope they land on good soil. So I would kind of challenge you here, Teresa, to just think about it. And the next opportunity, when you're in with the evangelicals and someone starts praying, just make the sign of the cross. Don't make a big flourish of it or anything like that. Just resolve, I'm going to do this, and just see what happens. If people start throwing rocks at you or anything like that, maybe don't do it the next time. But just, just see what happens. See if it doesn't open up the door, like I said, for some really good conversation. It'll be scary at first, but see if you can't do that, okay?
Okay. Well, I thank you very much. I'm going to do that for sure.
All right. God bless you, Teresa. Well, that's beautiful. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to move quickly because we are running low on time, but not low on questions. Matthew in Lake Tahoe, Nevada, listening on EWTN, Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Matthew, go ahead with your question for John Martinoni.
Hi,
Matthew. Yes, we can.
Yes, I'll make it quick. So I have a evangelical sister-in-law. I got on the tail end of your conversation about judging. And she's always judging people, quoting scripture, even to the point of condemnation of, they're going to hell type thing. And I just don't think that that's... I know there's passages in the Bible that talks about judging, but I came across James 4:11, and it specifically talks about not judging. So I just wonder to what level we can judge and how you go about that. Because to me, condemning is not bringing people into the faith.
Okay, well, there's a difference between judging and condemning, number one. And what I said is you can judge a person's actions, you cannot judge their heart. So we can't condemn someone, but we also can't canonize someone as individuals. Again, the church can, but we can't. And James 4:11, do not speak evil against one another, brethren. He that speaks evil against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. So again, it's talking here judging the person's heart. But if you look at Ezekiel chapter 33, verse 13 and following, says, though I say to the righteous that he shall surely live, yet if he trusts in his righteousness and commits iniquity, none of his righteous deeds shall be remembered, but in the iniquity that he has committed, he shall die. And he goes on to say that his guilt or is on you if you see him doing wrong and do not warn him about his sins. So you can say, again, if you've got a friend who's cheating on his or her wife or husband, you can say, hey, you really got to get right with God. This isn't right to be doing that. Or someone who continually steals from work, you can say, hey, look, you need to return all that stuff, or you need to go and just make a donation to your work. Or stop doing that. That's wrong to do that. So you judge their actions right or wrong. You do not judge their heart as saint or as beatified or canonized or condemned. So judge the actions, but not the heart. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Wonderful. Well,
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate the call. Let's go to Cleveland, listening on The Rock, 1260 AM in Cleveland. Jeff, go ahead with your question for John Martinoni.
Hey, John, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, Jeff. How about yourself?
Not too bad. I had a question. You were talking before about somebody had a question about judgment, and I was just kind of curious what the interpretation was. When Jesus was on the cross and there were the two thieves, there was the one who sort of mocked him, and then there was the other one who basically said, this is an innocent man, we're here for what we deserved or whatever, and Jesus said, I'll see you today in paradise. I was trying to understand it. Again, we can't judge, but I guess just my interpretation, I figured the guy would spend some time in purgatory being a thief, and the fact that, he was condemned. I don't know, maybe he was innocent or not, but in just trying to understand, who goes to heaven and in terms of judgment and purgatory or whatever, I just never... I could see Jesus saying something, I will see you one day in paradise. The same, I will see you today in paradise. I just trying to understand judgment and, who goes to purgatory, who ends up in heaven. I just, I guess I just assume the thief would probably spend a little time in purgatory,
Well, here's the thing. We can't say one way or the other. When Jesus says, this day you will be with me in paradise, well, you've got some issues there where, okay, well, Jesus didn't go straight to paradise. It says in 1 Peter 3:19, after he died, he went and preached to the spirits in prison. So there was these, no one was getting into heaven until Jesus was crucified and resurrected and opened up the gates of heaven. And then Jesus, on his resurrection, on the day of his resurrection, he says to the woman, he says, don't touch me, I have not yet ascended to my Father. So how could the good thief be in paradise with Jesus when that day when Jesus wasn't in paradise 3 days later. So there's all sorts of different ways you can take this. But in the end, what we need to know is it's not up to us to judge. The good thief, maybe through his suffering on the cross, and that is suffering, and his defense of God himself in his suffering, maybe through that he purified his soul perfectly so that he did not have to go to purgatory, that he went straight to heaven. And that's the thing. If your soul is perfected, in Hebrews 12, it talks about the souls of the just made perfect. If your soul has been made perfect here on this earth, then when you die, you go straight to heaven. There are some Catholics who think all people who died and go to heaven have to first go to purgatory. Not the case. But we don't know which ones do and which ones don't. Again, that's where God, knowing the hearts of men and women, he's the one who decides such matters.
Now, Jeff, is that clarifying for you?
Yeah, I think so. And as John was talking, I also thought about Peter in a day to God could be 1,000 years. So it might have been that day. And,
God is in there's one day in God's world, in God's universe. There's one moment. God is in the eternal present. So when you say this day, well, like you said, a day is as 1,000,000 years.
Right. Okay, no, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks very much. John Martinoni is our guest. We're talking about using the Bible in Catholic apologetics. Go to Oregon now. Nate in Oregon. Nate, are you there with us?
I'm here, yes.
All right, Nate, go ahead with your question for John Martinoni, and you're going to have to be kind of quick because we're getting up against it here.
Yes, I know. So I started learning to pray my rosary in Latin, but I come from an occultic background. I sometimes use techniques, but I try to keep it very... I don't know if it's safe for me to pray it in Latin. That's all I'm trying to say. Is it safe for me to pray it in Latin, my rosary?
Okay,
That's all I want
here's
to know.
the thing. Yeah, it's obviously it is not a sin or any such thing to pray the rosary in Latin. A lot of people do that. If in your instance it leads you into something, it's a reminder, it brings you back to times that have, where the occult is involved, whether you necessarily do anything occultish while praying the rosary or not, but if it opens those doors for you personally, if it gets you thinking about those things, then you might want to avoid it. If it doesn't do that, then yes, there's no problem whatsoever in general with praying the rosary in Latin. The question is it safe and good for you to do so because of the background you're coming from? That's something you have to determine. And again, I would say if doing that opens doors for you that you don't want to open, then maybe wait a while longer. Pray it in English for now and wait a while longer before you start back with the Latin.
Nate, that work for you?
I kind of, but it's like I'm a little different. Yeah, he's kind of right, but I'm just gonna go for it. It's because I felt the Holy Mother Mary in my heart, like she overjoyed me with the grace.
If it brings you those good feelings and that it deepens your spirituality to do it, then do it.
And Nate, that will do it for us. We are coming right up to the end. John Martinoni has been our guest. Next hour, we're going to be talking bioethics. But John, you want to tell us a little bit about the Bible Christian Society?
Yeah, BibleChristianSociety.com. I've got 29 different talks on all sorts of apologetics topics there. They're free for downloads. If you still have a CD player in your car, you can get a free CD with the talks. It's free. I've got a newsletter, apologetics newsletter I send out once every couple weeks or so. Pretty much everything is free except for the DVDs that I have to order from EWTN. But BibleChristianSociety.com, all sorts of free audio and written materials. Check it out.
John Martinoni, thanks so much. What a great hour. Really loved having you.
I've loved it, Si. Absolutely loved it.
Well, let's do it again before too long. Coming up next, we've got Father Tom Davis. It'll be his first time here with us on Catholic Answers Live. We're really looking forward to talking with him. Quite a helpful and very clear voice on the Catholic teachings on bioethics. Hang on. We'll have Father Tom right after this. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. As promised, finishing up Friday strong, and I've been really looking forward to this hour to get to talk with Father Thomas Davis, who is our guest. Father is the founder and president of the Liberty Institute for Faith and Ethics, and guess what? The acronym for that? LIFE, L-I-F-E. He's a priest of the Melkite Catholic Church and teaches bioethics and law at Holy Apostles College in Cromwell, Connecticut, where he serves as the chair of the Bioethics Graduate Concentration Program. Father, thank you very much for being with us.
I'm delighted to be here.
So I guess I'm taking it you got into the bioethics field because you have there's no problem with unemployment for those who are doing bioethics these days.
Yeah, it makes a lot. It's more than gas money.
Yeah. Well,
no.
It just seems like every week there's some innovation that you go, well, is that good or is that not good? Is this a positive or is this not a positive?
Yeah. There's so much because the technology is booming. So the technology drives so many of these new questions.
Yeah.
Catholic bioethics in a modern phase began really with Pius the 12th, a little bit with Pius the 11th, in addressing contraception and the nature of marriage. But technology boomed after that.
Yes.
So we now have all kinds of questions, right? Technological reproduction, germline cell therapy, in vitro fertilization, surrogate motherhood. Many questions arise because of developments in technology and biology.
Our number, by the way, if you have a bioethics question, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. It could be something that in your life, maybe it's just something that you'd like to understand better as the technology advances, how we make these moral calculations. 888-318-7884. It's a bit disheartening to me sometimes how quickly society seems to adopt new things like, say, surrogate motherhood without, I think, well, when did the debate happen? Nobody called me. Nobody asked me. There was no debate at all. It's just we go from zero to complete acceptance so quickly.
Yeah. Well, there's a utilitarian ethic that's emerged in the last century, very powerful. It began again, we'll talk about more modern developments, but it really got its legs in the 1930s and before that with the document known as the Humanist Manifesto, which put forth a humanist secular understanding of morality and ethics. And it had some very notable, significant thinkers and contributors to cultural dialogue who signed on to it. And that advanced a lot of these notions that what's practically possible can be chosen if that can achieve the greater mass of good, as though we can actually measure that and know what the outcomes will be. That's a rough, very rough description of their philosophy. I'm not doing it justice in that statement, but it gives the general idea. And that, combined with just dramatic developments in science and technology, biotechnology, has opened this door to possibility. And possibilities, people want to pursue possibilities where they see it benefits them. And that's really what's driven a lot of this. You mentioned surrogate motherhood. Buckle up for the new stuff, because it's going to get wild. Transhumanism is on the horizon.
Yes, right.
Which is the idea of ultimately achieving immortality. That's really what's driving that. And it has major players with a lot of money financing a lot of research. What kind of research? Well, the ultimate aim is to be able to upload human consciousness to some permanent status through computers.
Yeah. Right.
And have your human consciousness survive forever is the idea. Which really sort of excludes the possibility of salvation, but
yeah.
It's
well, less than a century to go from humanism to transhumanism. That's where things are picking up.
Yeah, very rapidly, and they're making giant strides. I mean, the ability of science to dive into these questions and advance the scientific and material knowledge needed to progress in various avenues is enhanced by the incredibly rapid multiplication of that scientific technology. The computer systems today that you hold in your hand, right? So you're holding on to this. You're able to do more with this than the computers that landed the Apollo project on the moon.
Yeah.
So, and that's exponentially increasing every few months.
Your questions are welcome here. We're talking bioethics with Father Thomas Davis. 888-318-7884 is the number. When you talk about uploading or downloading, I don't know which way it would go for my consciousness into a computer. There's a certain part of me that doesn't worry too much about that because of the nature of my consciousness. It's never going to fit into a computer. That's never going to work. But there are so many other things, genetic manipulation of embryos to make super people and gestating human beings in animals, mixing human beings and animals, that you think, well, the human race has never shown any restraint before on we can do it, but let's not do it. So you just think this is just mountains of human suffering coming.
Mountains. In 1979, when John Paul the Great assumed the office of Vicar of Pope, Bishop of Rome, he issued an encyclical, Redemptor Hominis, and that moved us into a new phase of addressing these questions, because in it he said there's been this tendency that marks modern society of the rapid advance of technology. But what hasn't come with that is an equal advance in the examination of ethics and morals. So he called for the creation of bioethical inquiry in the Catholic world. And, of course, since that time, there's been an explosion of Catholic think tanks and so forth addressing these questions. And that's actually how I got involved in the whole issue, because I was studying at Holy Apostles College and seminary here in Connecticut. And there was a wonderful man there, a priest, Monsignor David Liptak, who had helped found the John Paul II Bioethics Center in response to the Pope's encyclical.
Yeah.
And he founded it with another theologian and with a medical doctor. And they began to put together a lecture series with noted theologians, William May, Germain Grisey, people like that who are very well known in the world of moral theology. And they began to address these questions. And one of the first things they got into was technological reproduction or technological procreation. And not long, back in 1987, I think, I'm guessing at the year there, then Cardinal Ratzinger had put out from the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, Donum Vitae, which was a reflection on the respect due human life at its origins. And they addressed directly these questions of in vitro fertilization, artificial insemination, surrogate motherhood, and all the questions that multiply as more techniques become known for generating human life outside of sexual intimacy and marriage. They use terms like the conjugal act and the marital act. We want to avoid those terms, in my opinion. We have to talk very directly so people aren't wondering what we're talking about. We're talking about the mutual self-giving of a man and a woman, which is marked specifically by sexual intercourse. In a vocation, just like the priesthood is a vocation, marriage is a vocation, and it's a vocation toward the upbringing and rearing of children. That's its principal purpose. That's its foundation. In Genesis, made them male and female, and the first instruction, go forth and multiply, fill the earth. So in that instruction, Cardinal Ratzinger identified the ethical and moral problems with many of these techniques that separated the intimacy of a married couple in their mutual self-giving and in sexual intercourse as marking that self-giving. And in what he was reflecting on, how that robs the right of the child to be created, to be gestated, and to be born and raised in that environment of people with that vocation. Now, this, some say, is a very uniquely Catholic view, and it certainly is a Catholic view, but it's broader than Catholicism. Orthodoxy, I think, many of the Eastern Orthodox theologians would adopt the same conclusions if they might use different language in addressing it.
Again, 888-318-7884, our number. I will warn you, the lines are filling up. There's one line open, however, right now. If you have a question about bioethics for Father Thomas Davis, who is our guest, 888-318-7884. Father, I have a couple more questions I want to ask you, and then we'll get to the phones when we come back. I got to take a quick break, all right?
Sure.
All right, we'll take that break. We'll be right back with more with Father Thomas Davis.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting support provided by Homeschool Connections. Homeschool Connections hosts the Catholic Homeschool Conference. The 2022 Catholic Homeschool Conference is June 10th through 11th, and the website is CatholicHomeschoolConference.com. That's CatholicHomeschoolConference.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting by Great Catholic Music.
Great Catholic Music, your one-of-a-kind streaming platform for traditional Catholic hymns and contemporary favorites 24 hours a day. Music that soothes the soul, that's safe for the whole family to listen to. What a relief. Great Catholic Music. Download the free mobile app or listen on any Alexa-enabled device or write from your PC or tablet at greatcatholicmusic.com. Great Catholic Music. Melodies for the soul.
Okay, I've been a Catholic for 5 years, but I suffered under a lot of things due to my Protestantism as a Pentecostal, and I just want to personally ask God to bless you for your ministry, for everything you do, and the help that you give people.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, talking bioethics with Father Thomas Davis, and really, it's this area of morality, this area where the church teaching and the teaching of reason have to be applied to so many different things that there's a million directions that we could go. There really is. It seemed almost an endless number of directions we can go. But I want to ask you about two. Certainly, again, as I was pointing out before, a lot of times it seems like things are adopted before there's even much debate on it. People, all of a sudden, this thing has become normal. It seems like there's an attempt to do that with suicide and euthanasia. I do think that the disabled community has been very effective in pushing back against easy adoption of suicide and euthanasia. Can you say a little bit about what's coming out of the dicasteries in Rome about this push for suicide and euthanasia?
I will, and you used that term, dicasteries. That's a new term for us.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Until recently. Recently, they were congregation for this, the congregation for that. But the new constitution that Francis adopted changed their name to dicasteries.
Yeah, I'm nothing if not up to date, Father. I am.
Yeah, you're up to date. So, so the dicastery, formerly Congregation for Doctrine of the Faith, put out a letter, very interesting letter in 2001. Let me look at the exact date. If you want to take a look it up anywhere, they can find it on the website of the Holy See. And if they scroll around, they'll find a link to Roman Curia, and they go there and they pick the congregation they want to go to, or dicastery they want to go to, Doctrine of the Faith.
Yeah.
It's in English. It's called the Good Samaritan. It was back in 2021, so it's a relatively recent document, and it addresses the care of persons in the critical and terminal phases of life, and this is where most frequently this question of assisted suicide or euthanasia arises, not exclusively, right? We're seeing in some countries adoptions recently of people who are not facing terminal conditions, but have emotional disorders that make them depressed, and that being enough to allow, in the laws of those countries, a euthanasia or assisted suicide. But what the congregation said in that letter, which is so critically important, reaffirming, of course, the Declaration on Euthanasia from 1980, John Paul II's Evangelium Vitae, fantastic, The Gospel of Life, wonderful encyclical, in which he addresses euthanasia directly. He addresses abortion directly and declares that both are intrinsically and always evil and wrong. And the reason that it's important about this new letter, Good Samaritan, is that the actual language of the letter goes on addressing specifically euthanasia and says that those who approve laws of euthanasia and assisted suicide become accomplices in a grave sin that others will execute. Well, that's a very important statement because it makes it clear that political actors who vote for assisted suicide and euthanasia laws are guilty of the action carried out by those who then kill themselves. And the reason that's so important for the abortion debate as well is because when John Paul wrote Evangelium Vitae, he declared by his authority as the successor of Peter to confirm his brethren in the faith that those two actions, abortion and euthanasia, were always and everywhere intrinsically wrong. And the citation in the footnotes is Lumen Gentium 25, the Constitution, the Divine Constitution of the Church from Vatican II. And that is a paragraph that defines the infallible teaching of the ordinary magisterium of the Church. So these teachings are infallible. And if it's infallibly true that those who approve and pass laws for euthanasia are now accomplices in the grave sin, then it's equally true for those who vote for bills that allow for abortion. And we have to make one important, very important qualification on the abortion question. Those who vote for a permissive abortion law because it improves existing disrespect for life and limits the abortion in some way can justifiably do that as long as they make known their total opposition to abortion. So I think this new statement from 2021 really tees up a hot topic for those who enter into the political world to understand that the Church is very clear in its teaching that if you vote for these things, allowing for that exception I mentioned on abortion, where you improve underlying circumstances, you're guilty of the grave sin as an accomplice to those who carry out the acts.
Well, thank you. And again, that clarity from the Catholic Church is always very, very helpful. I have found in the work that we do here that there are many people who will listen to the Catholic Church who are not Catholic because they know that the Catholic Church has a long tradition of thinking these things through, that tradition is supported by lived experience in the universities and hospitals that the Church has, in the ministry of priests, at the bedside of many people. So I just want to say that as we're in the midst of this conversation, because sometimes it can feel futile, but it's not at all futile. The Church is actually doing a great service to the world in just speaking clearly about these things.
Yeah, I mean, call things what they are.
Yeah.
Right? Live Not by Lies, the book that came out a few years ago by Rod, I forget Rod's last name. Anyway.
Is it Rod Bennett?
Live Not by Lies.
No.
Pardon me?
No, I got confused. No,
anyway.
Go ahead, Father.
Yeah, no, so the Church has got a long history and a lot of knowledge to share. But principally, it's rational and it's reasonable. I mean, people who don't follow the Church, people who hear the Church's arguments, when they hear them properly expounded in something other than sound bites and other than polemical argument, are often persuaded that there's a rational argument there. If we can get people to that point, that they accept that what we're proposing is rational and reasonable, we've made great strides.
Yes. Yeah.
For instance, in the contraception topic, unquestionably the most disregarded teaching of the Church, in my mind, in morality today. Right? People say, well, you're saying that you can't do something that disrupts the natural function of the body, but you take an aspirin if you have a fever. I mean, I've received people saying that to me. I said, well, there's a principle in bioethics called totality of the person, and certain aspects of totality can be suppressed for the greater good of the rest of the organism. This is Pius XII's teaching back in the 1950s. So that's why we can take things like medications that might cause some natural function to be suppressed in order to benefit the totality of the organism, our human body. So that's an easy answer to that part of it. But the real answer about contraception is much deeper. And John Paul really expounded this. He's taken us to a new level of understanding of this, about the mutual self-giving of a man and woman in marriage, a total commitment to one another, a total self-giving. And when you don't receive or give your fertility, you haven't made a total self-gift.
Yeah.
So that you engage in a language of the body and you contradict it by the actual withholding of the gift. So people who are pure secularist atheists who I've discussed this with said, gee, I never even thought of that.
No,
and they're willing to give that some consideration.
Right. And that's such an encouraging thing. Rod Dreher wrote the book.
That's it.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick, for helping me with that. Patrick in New York always helps me out. I always know I can turn to him. The number is 888-318-7884. I'm going to go to the phones. I do have more questions, but I got to stop my questions and let other folks ask questions. Let's go to Carolyn in Milltown, South Dakota, listening on 91.3 FM. Carolyn, thank you so much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Father Thomas Davis.
Thank you for taking my call. And I think you might have answered it a little bit in some of your preceding comments, but a friend of mine that was non-Catholic had introduced me to a concept that other families that have undergone IVF and have embryos, I guess, still frozen that they, quote unquote, don't need anymore, and recognizing the sanctity of life at conception. What is the Catholic stance in the concept of where families can, I guess, adopt these embryos and implant them if they are having fertility issues?
Wow, it's such a difficult topic. There's a divergence of view among very respectable theologians and moralists writing on this particular topic. The Congregation of Doctrine of Faith addressed it obliquely, if not quite directly, in a document a couple years ago. What was that document? Humanae Personae. And they didn't really answer the question directly. What they did say is that the proposal seems to have many objections, but they didn't outright rule on it. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has taken the stance that there is no definitive teaching on that question. And the normal rule of morality is where law is doubtful, freedom reigns. So there is an argument, and a substantial argument, that in some circumstances embryo adoption could be justified. I don't subscribe to that myself. However, the argument would be that it would have to take place in a married couple that intends to gestate and raise the child as their own. Otherwise, they're engaged in surrogacy by just using the womb to gestate the child and then put it off for adoption. So that would run afoul of teachings on surrogacy. I think there's a problem with it because I think that the language from Donum Vitae, the Congregation Doctrine of Faith's document on respect for origins of life, the beginnings of life, back in 1987, said that it appears that they're in a hopeless condition, the frozen embryos that have been abandoned, in a hopeless condition, and I think they are, in my opinion. And again, it's still a question that's open to resolution. But the reason I think it's a problem is that marriage is a vocation between a man and a woman in which they have the reciprocal, I don't want to use the wrong word here, but I'm going to try anyway, the reciprocal ownership of each other. And that the use of the woman's uterus to gestate something that's not the progeny of her husband violates the fidelity due to marriage. So I think there's a problem there. There's certainly a tremendously fine intention, right? We're talking about the subjective level now, of those who want to rescue human life. Recent proposals have come out to try and say this is analogous to people in a religious order in the Middle Ages who would give themselves in exchange for prisoners who were taken by Islamic armies in order to free someone who might have a family at home and get them back to their family, these religious orders being people who had taken vows of celibacy. And that somehow that was analogous to to embryo adoption, I frankly, I can't see the analogy on that. And increasingly, a lot of arguments in favor of it, in my opinion, seem to stretch in order to justify it. The strongest argument in favor of it is the human being has been created and has a right to life. And we don't have anything to do with creating the unjust circumstance. And if we can intervene in a way to remedy or to save a life, we should do so. Usually that's expressed in the language of duty, that we have a duty to do so. I certainly don't agree with that. There's no duty to do that. People have duties towards unjust situations to others that they have created the unjust situation for, or who are their children, for instance, but not embryo adoption.
Carol, we got to leave it there because you can probably hear the music. We got to take a quick break. Every single line full, so lots and lots more bioethics questions for our guest, Father Thomas Davis. Right back with those questions after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Does the Church have too many rules? Join me, Dr. David Anders, as we answer your questions right here on Called to Communion, Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Father Thomas Davis is our guest. We had been hearing him in other media, and just a wonderful ability to communicate clearly about what are really some of the most delicate topics. I'm going to go with the most delicate topics we face today. Some of these bioethics questions, some of them having to do with human sexuality, others having to do just with life and death issues, how to apply new technologies to various situations, when that's acceptable, when that's not acceptable. We need people to help us with these things, people who know, and Father Thomas Davis is one of those people. He's going to be teaching a course in bioethics. You're going to be teaching a kind of is it an intro to bioethics course?
It is. It's an introduction to bioethics, yeah. And so it's not a college level course. It's accessible to the average person. There's some reading associated with it, and it'll be 19 weeks, beginning in May and going through to October on Monday evenings.
And that's at the Institute of Catholic Culture.
Right.
That's where you're teaching. So
that's where it's going to be.
Yeah, if you just look up the Institute for Catholic Culture.
And it's free, right? It's free and it's live. There'll be question and answer sessions after each lecture.
That's pretty hard to beat. That's pretty hard to beat that price. And they just do wonderful work too, the Institute for Catholic Culture. So I recommend it highly. Well, you've already heard Father Davis, and you can make your judgments there. But if you want to take a 19-week course that you don't have to pay for, it's not a college credit course, it's an introduction to these ideas, you will become someone who's very helpful to other people if you know these things. And we need people who can answer these questions, because they're tough. There's a lot of them are tough. As a matter of fact, I'm going to prove how tough they are. I'm going to go back to the phones.
Well, before you do it,
let
me just mention that you can sign up for the course and then as an audit basis. And if you decide you want to come to week 3, because that's a topic you're interested in, or let's see, week 9 on neurologic criteria for death and organ transplant, then you come those weeks. You don't have to be there for every session.
This could not get any better. This is the perfect situation. Free, excellent instructor, extremely timely topic, and drop in when you need. Drop in and take what you need. Check out at the Institute for Catholic Culture. I'm going to go to Vancouver, Washington now. Joseph, listening on or watching on Catholic.com. Joseph, we're glad to have you. Go ahead with your question for Father Thomas Davis.
Hi, Father Thomas. Thank you for your vocation. I had a question regarding doing funeral planning and so forth, and just regarding donating your body to science, and if that is appropriate, and then if so, how would you go about it so you don't, donate to some way, or your body isn't used for inappropriate things that would not be ethical from a biological standpoint. And then part 2 of that would be cremation versus, just a traditional burial. Obviously, if you donated your body, maybe cremation would be more appropriate. So I hope that made some sense.
It makes a lot of sense. It's a wonderful question. It's a very important question. Let's start with the tail end of it first. Cremation is a perfectly acceptable manner for the disposing of a human remain, if it's done with respect, of course. The past objection to cremation in Catholicism was related in large part to conduct of cremation by certain groups that cremated specifically because they were declaring the denial of the resurrection. So there was concern about that, and that's a legitimate concern to have. But we're really past that point. Today, everybody you know can find out just about anything they want to know in a few minutes, just picking up this and doing some Google or DuckDuckGo searches. And so cremation is an acceptable manner for the disposal of human remains. And then, of course, the cremated remains should then be interred or buried. They're not to be scattered about on a lake or in the ocean or on the mountainside. So those are the Church's teachings about cremation. Now, with respect to donation of anatomical parts or of the body, these are considered laudable. One thing that's sort of obvious but needs to be said is that a living person can't donate a vital non-paired organ. You can't donate something you need to stay alive. If you only got one kidney left, you can't donate that one kidney because you're going to die. But donation of anatomical part, you want to avoid in it being used for purposes that you would object to. So you can create a document of anatomical gift. If you take a look at libertyforlife.org, that's liberty, the number 4, life.org. It's my website. You'll find a bioethical library. And in there, one of the first things you'll see in that library is anatomical gift and advanced medical directives. And if you go through some of those documents, you'll see some language within there about how you can protect against uses you wouldn't want to see it used for. But overall, let me say that organ donation is a laudable and very important thing. There are some issues you want to be aware of. Oftentimes, anatomical gift results from somebody who's declared brain dead. So they've been injured in an accident, they've been killed, murdered, whatever, and they're brain dead, and now the family's asked to consider an anatomical gift. What you want to be sure about is that the person has really met their demise. And usually that's not going to be uncertain, right? Usually that's going to be pretty clear. The old definition was the permanent cessation of circulatory function and respiratory function. No blood circulating, no breathing and respiration happening, not exchanging carbon dioxide and oxygen. In 1968, a commission at Harvard University developed the neurological criteria, and there's been controversy about that criteria. The church's teaching is that the neurological criteria seem to be a valid criteria for determining death. There have been a number of unexplainable cases that raise some concern for some people. Father Nicodor Ostrajko at Providence College has highlighted one of these, an autopsy of a boy named Tommy Kay who continued after certified brain death to stay alive on a ventilator and feeding tube for many, many years. Went through puberty, grew hair, fingernails, body self-regulated temperature, body fought off infections. Underlying all that is a strong suspicion by many in the medical world that there was an incorrect diagnosis of brain death, that there was still some neurological function. We don't know everything about the brain and the human brain. But if you get electrocephalogram and it's flat, the person is dead. And in those cases, donating the organs of that person so that someone else can benefit is a laudable act. If you're going to donate organs so people can do experiments on how to create hybrid creatures, half pig, half animal, so forth, half human, so forth, I would have a problem with that. So again, at libertyforlife.org, you'll find advanced medical directive documents that address that question.
And I'm going to leave it there because I got to take a very quick break. But Joseph, thanks very, very much for the question. I hope that was helpful to you. We'll be right back with more on bioethics with Father Thomas Davis right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
One of the reasons we should go to Mass is because it is the food of the saints that we receive. And for the saints, they understood rightly that the time after Holy Communion, that those moments are the most precious moments of our lives.
The Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, live from the EWTN Chapel, every morning, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and Television.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. This hour seems to be proceeding quickly. Maybe it's because there are so many people on the line, and now I have anxiety about getting to everybody. But we're talking about bioethics. Our guest is Father Thomas Davis. You're welcome to call with your question if you have a bioethics question, 888-318-7884. Let's go to Donald in Plainsboro, New Jersey, listening on Domestic Church Radio. So glad to have you, Donald. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Hi, Father. I thought I heard a news report saying that they were putting miniature human organs on microchips. Would they have to be microscopic, I suppose? And I don't know does this make any sense? Is this true?
I haven't heard about that, and I don't think anything in biological research has yet produced miniaturized organs. I haven't heard anything like that. But the general topic you're touching on is transhumanism, I think, as increased efforts are underway to control the evolution of the human species, to change evolution of human species, and to create designer humans, which is a concern with all other kinds of topics besides transhumanism. But I haven't heard anything about miniaturized human organs. I'm not quite sure how that would work, or even how the technology would exist to be able to put them anywhere.
Thought I had a dream and it was right. But okay, Father. Well, thank you. Thank you, Father.
Thanks, Donald. Thanks for the question. The number is 888-318-7884. Working our way through calls here for Father Thomas Davis. I do want to ask you, Father, before and I will go back to calls, but there's a general kind of, I would say, anxiety in the world about a lot of us. The parents live longer and longer. Death is not. It seems to me like there's a lot of intervention on heart attacks or cancer that might have taken people in their 70s before, but now people living into their 80s, 90s, past 100. And what are my obligations? What are the end of life things that I should know in caring for the parents? Can you help us with that a little bit, and then we'll go back to calls?
Yeah, I hope so. So the fundamental question that arises in every circumstance of determining what intervention, a modality of treatment or care is appropriate, is going to depend on very specific circumstances faced in the here and now. Trying to decide what to do 10 years down the road with living wills offers some risks of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Advanced medical directives that are proper to limit it can be quite good, but they have to be very carefully. The boilerplate stuff off of the internet, don't use. Unless, of course, you use mine. Then, of course, that's all right.
Okay, good to know. Important clarification, Father.
But that letter I mentioned from the CDF previously in the show, Good Samaritan, in 2021, actually addresses these questions quite directly, especially for people who are very old or are facing terminal conditions. And the basic question is, what test do you apply? How do you measure what to do? Well, the basic rule is that where a particular care is futile, where it doesn't offer a reasonable hope of benefit, there's no obligation to intervene in that manner. In fact, and that's really a question in which we have to turn to those who are experts, to the medical profession, who, there's all kinds of nightmare and stories people have about doctors who didn't care or did the wrong thing, but these people will enter into their professions with a deep desire to help human beings. And generally, in a dispassionate and calm conversation, asking questions about diagnosis, asking questions about prognosis, and what the modalities of treatment are and how they can help, you'll get very good, accurate information about whether or not a particular thing has a reasonable hope of benefit. If it doesn't, you don't have to apply it. If it does have a reasonable hope of benefit, then you have to determine whether or not it imposes an undue burden on the person. Undue burden is always a risk of death. A serious risk of death is always an undue burden. Anytime there's a serious risk of death in a treatment, you don't have to undertake it no matter what. Treatments that cause intense and enduring pain, they don't have to be taken. Now, a lot of treatment causes pain, surgical interventions, for instance, but they're controlled with medication. Some things that can't be controlled and they're going to cause this great pain, they're going to be excessive. Even in circumstances that could result, not something we face in the United States really, but in the old moralists would say if the treatment could bankrupt the family. Today we don't really have that situation. Today with insurance and with federal Title 19 and other programs, the care is usually available. So you have to examine whether there's a reasonable hope of benefit and then determine whether or not the particular modality imposes an undue burden on the person if there is a reasonable hope of benefit. If you go to that Good Samaritan document on the CDF list of documents, you'll find they even have a chapter in it that begins with the line, the moral obligation to exclude aggressive medical treatment. And here they're talking about there are circumstances in which it's just improper to subject someone to where death is imminent. That's the first criteria, where death is imminent, to a painful procedure that offers little hope of benefit. That's really an inappropriate thing to do to a human being. People are often concerned about the big topics they get concerned about are ventilators. Many people have expressed it to me, elderly people, being sustained on ventilators or sustained with artificial nutrition and hydration. Well, what they really mean is assisted nutrition and hydration delivered by some artificial means. As long as those modalities, especially nutrition and hydration, can provide their finality, that is, they provide nutrition and they provide hydration to allow a body to maintain homeostasis, they should be provided. There's a presumption in favor of that always. The other question is about more dramatic interventions, surgical procedures. Things like antibiotics normally should be provided. When you get a person in advanced dementia, becomes the other big question many people face about elderly people they're concerned about for themselves as they get older. A person with dementia has different stages they go through as the disease progresses. It's a fatal disease, and it will take them eventually if something else doesn't happen. But if it progresses to the point where a person has to be put on a feeding tube, and they are reacting extremely negatively to that feeding tube, they're trying to pull it out and so forth, that's a form of communication from that person that the burden has become excessive for them. And I think that a person in the advanced stages of terminal dementia who is reacting in a dramatic way to pull out feeding tubes, and the only way to stop that is to restrain their arms. I think my judgment is that person has reached that final stage where you can withdraw the treatment. But it's always a question of going to the medical professionals and finding out specific prognosis and what's that particular modality you're talking about, medication, surgical procedure, adaptive device, so forth, and what's the benefit they get from that. And then weighing the goods and the proportionality between the benefit and the burden. That's the next step to make. One thing you can never do is treat the fact that the person continues to be alive as a burden. That's not, when we talk about benefit and burden, we're talking about the actual impact of the modality on the person, not the fact that they continue to live. Now, that's an important distinction to keep in mind.
Thank you. What a wonderful primer, Father. Thank you very, very much. Extremely helpful and clear. And now, you can see why we wanted to invite Father Thomas Davis to be on here with us and talk about bioethics. Your bioethics questions are welcome. I am going to go now to Pat in Nebraska, listening on 102.7 KVSS Spirit Catholic Radio in Nebraska. Go ahead, Pat, with your question for Father.
Yes, thanks for taking my call, Father. There was some controversy over the COVID vaccines.
Was there?
And their development.
I'm only kidding.
I had some good Catholic friends that wouldn't do it, wouldn't take Moderna or Pfizer. Is there any effort being developed or to pursue vaccines that don't use any tie to embryonic stem cells? And if not, what can one do to help that cause?
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Pat. And I just want to say before I address your question, I love getting a call from Nebraska because when I was young, it was a long time ago, one of my heroes was Johnny Rogers, the running back from Nebraska. I went to play Canadian football, which broke my heart because I could never see him play, But anyway.
I'm sorry about that, Father. I hope you're over it now.
It's a scar. It's a scar.
Yeah.
Has lingering things. But there are some groups that are working on vaccine development, and it's been highly encouraged by the Vatican and by other sources in the Church. I don't know the names of all these different groups. There's one out there. I think it's called. I don't want to get the name wrong, so let me not do that. But there are some out there doing that. But let's talk a moment about the COVID vaccines and vaccines in general. The issue, as it's analyzed by the Congregation for Doctrine of the Faith and their document about the COVID vaccines, and by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops and their decisions about the COVID vaccine, is under a rubric called cooperation with evil. And cooperation with evil is a topic about when you find yourself engaged in life and there are things you do that seem to be joined to evil things being done by others, how far can you go in being involved in that or not? These are not, by the way, dogmas or really doctrines, properly speaking, of the Church. These are rough prudential judgments of trying to find a way to confront and live with the realities we face. Now, with the vaccines, one of the conclusion that the congregation reached in the USCCB, which was that the cooperation was not formal, which means it didn't intend any of the underlying evil that occurred in the abortion. So that would be formal cooperation, which is never permitted. But that it's material cooperation, but that material cooperation was remote enough that it didn't involve anyone in the evil action itself, and there was a proportionate reason, which is the protection of life in what appeared at the moment to have been a critical moment of need, and therefore it was a permissible thing to receive the vaccine. There's been some critique of that that I am in agreement with, not that they came to the wrong conclusion. I think they came to the correct conclusion, but that they came to it by the wrong analysis, that it really should not have been examined under the rubric of cooperation with evil. That's more like the nurse in the operating room or the resident who's told to go in and assist the surgeon who's doing an abortion, or perhaps the nurse who's simply taking care of the patient in post-op. And preparing saline solutions for her, which of course I don't think there'd be any problem with that. But there's another rubric called appropriation of benefit. And this concept of appropriation from benefit seems much more suited, because cooperation with evils almost always, or typically, it's about something that's happening in relatively the same time that somebody else is doing something evil or very near it temporarily. We're talking about human embryonic stem cell kidney cells from a abortion in 1973 that, although it appears to have been a voluntary abortion, yet there's still a glimmer of possibility that the tissue came from a spontaneous abortion, which would have been a miscarriage, because the fellow who testified about this, the scientist who was involved in creating the stem cell line, Graham, has said he didn't know where the material came from. He presumed it came from an abortion, but he doesn't know. He just got shipment of material. And all the records concerning it have long since been lost. So let's assume it was an abortion a long time ago. Appropriation from benefit is whether or not you can take for yourself the benefit of something that had its origins in something illicit and evil. Well, let's take a couple of examples. You ride the railroads in the southern states that were built by slaves. Can you ride the railroad? Are you cooperating with evil in a way that prohibits you from doing that? You're so far removed from it. It doesn't seem like cooperation with evil is the appropriate rubric to analyze it. You're appropriating a benefit from something that was done that was immoral, forcing slaves to build those railroads. But you're not involved in that in any way, and you're not advancing or encouraging that activity in any manner. So I think you can appropriate the benefit from that. Another example that's sometimes floated out there, I'm not sure the scientific story behind it's accurate, but it's a good example nonetheless, was about prisoners of war in Korea, American prisoners of war, who were subjected to frostbite. And then there was study done by scientists on the other side to see what would or wouldn't help that frostbite. Now, frostbite was purposely induced. If that knowledge produced useful information, would we be prohibited from using that knowledge today to treat frostbite? Or could we appropriate the benefit of that knowledge even though it was obtained by a terribly illicit means? I think the answer to that's self-evident. There's no involvement in the activity. There's no encouraging it to take place. There's no advancing it. So I think that the vaccines are under cooperation analysis. It's far too remote from the underlying activity to make the person receiving a vaccine morally culpable in any way for the abortion. And under appropriation of benefit, a similar conclusion. Now, there's a lot of other things in your life that use these fetal stem cells and HK, this particular fetal stem cell, ibuprofen, Tums, many other kinds of simethicone, many over-the-counter products that people use all the time were also developed and tested with the same stem cell line. But they're not the fetal cells. They're stem cell lines that are hundreds, if not thousands, of generations removed from the original cells.
Pat, I'm going to leave it there. And Father, may we have your blessing and our listeners have your blessing before we go.
Of course. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. May the Lord of mercy descend upon us. May the Holy Spirit enlighten us. May the Holy Theotokos, the Mother of God, ever Virgin Mary, guide us, guard us, and protect us by her intercession for the glory of God. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Father Thomas Davis, thank you very, very much.